Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm curious to hear later on how you cooperate with Tony's Chocolonely. But yeah, it comes probably at no surprise that I'm going to talk about chocolate, as we're a chocolate company. And before I start, I wanted to ask you a few questions. We've been sitting all morning, and sitting is not very good for your health, like chocolate. So maybe if the answer is yes to the question, could you stand up? Have you ever tried chocolate? Almost everyone tried a piece of chocolate before. Do you like chocolate? Still the majority of people stands. Do you eat chocolate regularly, say once per month, every few weeks maybe? Still a large group of people. Not daily maybe. Thanks, you can all sit down again. So I think a lot of people associate chocolate with a lot of positive things. A moment of indulgence, treating yourself, maybe warm childhood memories. And today, unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about those positive things about chocolates, but I'm going to talk about the bitter truth behind the chocolate industry, and specifically about the main ingredient in chocolate, cocoa. And before I dive into Tony's Chocolonely and what we do as a company, I want to quickly explain something about the cocoa value chain and the cocoa industry to you. So on one end of the value chain, there's millions of smallholder farmers. And on the other side of the value chain, there's billions of customers, like most people here, who sometimes enjoy a piece of chocolate. And in the middle of that value chain, there's a handful of big chocolate companies. Over 90% of all cocoa worldwide is processed by just 10 big chocolate companies. And those 10 companies in the middle of that value chain is also where most of the profit lives. Today I'm going to mainly focus on two countries, Ivory Coast and Ghana, and together they produce 60% of the world's cocoa supply. That happens at 2.5 million smallholder farms. And like I just explained, most of the profit of this industry does not end up with those smallholder farms. And that leads to lots of problems. On those smallholder farms in just Ivory Coast and Ghana, there's 1.5 million children working illegally. And this is not just children working for a couple of hours after school. I'm talking about illegal labor. And out of those over 1.5 million children, 95% of them does not just do illegal labor, but hazardous work. Think of working with dangerous chemicals, machetes, heavy machinery. And apart from that, the Global Slavery Index also estimates that on these farms, there's around 30,000 cases of what we call modern slavery. And you can think of things like forced labor, human trafficking, that falls into that bucket. As I said before, it's not going to be a happy story about the cocoa industry. And most of these problems that I just described come from the fact that those farmers live in extreme poverty. And it's less than 5% of the sales of a chocolate bar that goes to these farmers. And that leads to 1 in 2 children that work on these farms that work there illegally. So again, I want to stress, it's not about working a couple of hours after school, it's about doing illegal work, long hours, unpaid, hazardous work, dangerous conditions. So Tony's Chocolonely is an impact company that makes chocolate. And I really want to stress, we're an impact company that makes chocolate and not the other way around. Our mission, our purpose as a company, is that together we'll end exploitation in cocoa. And today I'm going to talk to you about how we do that, and also about how we safeguard that mission towards the future. So there's 3 things I want to talk to you today about how we do that. And the first is creating awareness. I think when I asked the question in the beginning of whether you sometimes eat chocolate and whether you enjoy that, most of you did not think about the inequality that lies behind that chocolate bar. Or even worse, that there's probably illegal child labor that contributed to that nice, sweet taste that you're tasting whenever you try chocolate. So awareness is important in changing this topic, and we do that through multiple ways. And I think one you've already heard, and that's through our very remarkable, like the remarkable way that our bar looks. So it's unequally divided, but apart from that, also in our wrapper, we tell the story of how the cocoa industry is so unequally divided. And I think if I would ask most of you to draw a chocolate bar, it would look like something similar to this. Neat squares, very fairly, evenly distributed. But the cocoa industry is so unequally divided that our bar looks like this, to represent that inequality in the value chain. And is there anyone who sees something familiar in this pattern? It's hard to spot if you don't know that it's there. We're also highlighting the countries that we source from within this pattern. Because in the end, it's for us all about those smallholder farmers. So what do we then do? We try to lead by example. And there's two things I want to share about leading by example. One is how we try to change that cocoa value chain. And the other thing is about being a profitable business. As we just heard, the only way to be successful in changing this industry is by showing that it can be done, not through being an NGO or not through losing money, but through being profitable as well. So we source according to the 5 sourcing principles. And the main thing I want to highlight is the first sourcing principle, and that's traceable cocoa beans. And traceability is really where everything starts, because we cannot do any of the other sourcing principles if we don't know where our beans come from. And we're proud to say that we've got 100% traceability bean to bar for all of our cocoa beans. Next to that, we pay farmers a higher price, a living income reference price. We invest heavily in strong farmers and only work with farmers that are united in a co-op. We invest in the long term. Usually within the cocoa industry, contracts are 1 season, and we sign contracts for 5 years. And lastly, we invest in quality and productivity to also enable farmers even more to make a living wage on their farms. And the results are there. 3 things I want to highlight is that Tony's Open Chain, our supply chain, increases cocoa farming household income substantially with 62%. We're also proud to say that in our value chain, and this might sound odd to people, but we're proud to say that only 1 in every 22 children that work at farm work there illegally. And this might come across weird. Why am I proud to stand here and say that we have 1 in 22 children in our value chain working illegally at the farm? Because that's the way that our company works. So we assign co-ops, new co-ops, that are at an industry average of the 1 in 2 children that work illegally, like I just explained. And because of the way that we do business, because the higher prices we pay, because of the longer contracts that we sign, we are able to drive that down to just 1 in 22. And 100% of the cases that we find of child labor, illegal child labor, are remediated. So we're 100% transparent as well about what we see in our value chain and how we remediate the cases that we do still find. And last but not least, as you can't be successful on a broken planet, because of the traceability of our beans, we're also able to track things like deforestation. And we're at 100% deforestation free for all of our farms. And it's not just us claiming this, it's also luckily independent research showing our success, as we're proud of being #1 on the chocolate scorecard for many years now. Lastly, we also want to inspire to act. Because in the end, we cannot do this alone. Currently, our bean share in Ivory Coast and Ghana is just 0.4%. We're by no means one of those 10 big chocolate companies yet. We're super proud, we're fast growing, we just launched in the US and Walmart. We're proud of everything that we're doing, but this is our bean share, and it's not enough to change the industry in those countries. So what did we do? We started sharing what makes us unique. And that's pretty scary as a company. But we started by giving other companies access to our supply chain. Through Tony's Open Chain, we give other companies access to source beans via our supply chain. That started with a few small other impact companies or bigger impact companies that share our values, such as Ben & Jerry's. But by now we've got 20 mission allies, and that includes, for instance, a few big Dutch retailers. And in 24-25, we will source more than 30,000 metric tons of beans. So, as you hopefully understand by now, we're pretty proud of our story. But how do we safeguard that mission towards the future? Because in the end, governance is one of the topics of this conference. And how do we make sure that the work that we're doing is safeguarded towards the future? And indeed, as you already mentioned, the founding story of Tony's begins with a journalist, Teun. And he was the one looking into this value chain of cocoa and actually finding out it was not possible to buy a bar of chocolate that had no illegal child labor in there. And he founded this company. And quite soon after founding the company, he was joined by an entrepreneur who fully shared his mission and was also the majority owner of the company. And a few years ago, he sold the company to a private equity investor. I'm not here to bash our PE investor. They're also really on board with our mission, super supportive. But it did make people within the company think and realize, how do we make sure that whenever ownership of the company changes, nothing about what I just told you should be able to change? And how do we make that happen? Well, in June last year, June 23, we introduced Tony's mission lock. This is a legal mechanism that secures our mission for the rest of eternity, regardless of shareholder structure. So how does it work? We've got 3 mission guardians who are in a standalone entity, and they represent and safeguard both our mission of eliminating child labor and other forms of exploitation in the cocoa value chain and the 5 sourcing principles I just explained. You might wonder, how do they do that? To simplify, they've got a non-economic stake in the company. We call that a golden share. And they've got different tools at hand whenever they suspect a mission breach. The first is that they're able to act whenever they suspect a mission breach. They've got multiple different tools to do so. And if they're unable to solve that issue internally, they also have multiple tools at hand to escalate the matter towards the public and legally. And again, this is something we also share with others. So if you're interested, please go to tonysmissionlock.org, because we created an open source handbook that fully explains the legal structure behind what we're doing, how it's set up within the company, how it's come into place, what exactly those tools are that those mission guardians hold, those special powers, or guardian powers as we like to call them, and how you could maybe implement this within your organization. Before I close off, I wanted to share a short video with you.
Once upon a time, we all had our parts to play. We worked together with our farmers, guaranteed them honest pay. We traced our cocoa beans and thought the long-term way. We were mindful of what we bought. We worked together and took action. We explored a different narrative, one in which it was not only us, but several main characters. Chapters divided equally, plot lines casually met. We told our story to our colleagues, to our kids, and to our friends. We repeated it for days and weeks, tried really hard to change our beliefs. We wanted not a fairy tale, but a reality to be proud of, because we realized that only then our story could be fair again.